Hello everyone. Today we will be discussing Chapter 13, Social Psychology. And so to begin with, social psychology is the study of the causes and consequences of our social behavior. And so besides one other species that includes ants, bees, and termites, humans are the only ones whose society consists of genetically unrelated individuals. On any given day, we interact with a variety of people and a variety of contexts and situations. So social psychology is interested in what determines with whom we choose to interact and how those interactions go. So as we've discussed in previous chapters, every living creature faces the same problem, which is survival. So this evolutionary perspective suggests that we have two primary tasks involving survival and reproduction. So how and why do people interact with others the way they do? So social psychology is very interesting by demonstrating why we act in certain ways, even in types of behavior that we're not even aware of. And so to begin with, we talk about aggression. So when resources are scarce, evolutionarily speaking, we either help each other or hurt each other in order to survive. And a basic human reaction and social behavior discussed in the chapter is aggression. So it's a way of obtaining resources, although we do see varying degrees of aggression across many individuals. The frustration-aggression principle or hypothesis explains that people aggress when their goals are thwarted. And so examples of this principle include football crowds becoming aggressive when their team loses, and even the movie Fight Club when one of the main characters joins a fight club when he's bored with work and frustrated with his life. So research has demonstrated that there are parts of this hypothesis that are true, yet it's really an incomplete explanation of aggression. So here are a couple of examples demonstrating why we see aggression. So studies show that when people or animals are put in a negative situation, they are more likely to aggress, whether or not there are goals. So also if you're in a bad mood or experiencing negative affect, you may act out in an aggressive manner. So the best predictor of aggression overall is actually gender. And so you may ask yourself, why is gender the best predictor of aggression? And this is a great question. So part of it may be due to socialization, but part of it may also be because of higher levels of testosterone. So socially, it's more acceptable for males to show anger or aggression through competition. Going off of gender stereotypes, males are expected to play sports and be competitive, whereas females are supposed to be more docile and ladylike. So additionally, males have higher levels of testosterone, which high levels often make people feel more threatened, more confident and powerful, and it makes them less able to notice threat from others. So significantly, or similarly actually, people with high self-esteem are usually the aggressor. So because they may feel that their high status may be threatened, so they're more likely to act out in aggression towards another person. So significantly, when girls act out aggressively, females display differently. So females talk about someone behind their back and spread rumors about that individual. And these are more social transgressions than direct acts of aggression, but are still considered a type of bullying and harassment, and ultimately an act of aggression. So here is an example of how aggression may be influenced by our environment. So numerous research studies have demonstrated that there's a significant positive relationship between temperature and aggression. So in this example, generally, what we know is that professional pitchers have awfully good aim, so that when they hit the batter with a baseball, it's safe to assume that it wasn't an accident. And so this figure shows the average number of batters who were hit by pitches per game during the 1986 through 88 Major League Baseball seasons. So as you can see, the temperature on the field was highly correlated with the likelihood of being beamed with a baseball. So other ways of interacting with people include cooperation. And so cooperation is a behavior between two or more that leads to some mutual benefit for both parties. So this can be thought of as in the case of crime shows like Law and Order, where the investigator or cop is interrogating both suspects and try to pit one another against in order to get a confession. And this is known as a prisoner's dilemma. So in this prisoner's dilemma, cooperation is risky because your accomplice may or may not rat you out to the police. And the trustworthiness of your accomplice or friend is key to both of you getting either sentenced or let go without any charges. So when we consider cooperation, we are good at detecting cheating and respond to it strongly, and we may even respond to it illogically, meaning that we basically will go out of our way and even pay to punish people that treat us unfairly, even if it is at our own expense. So one real-world example of cooperation that is always discussed in politics is our taxes. And so if we all cooperate and pay our fair share of taxes, things move along pretty well. But what about when some people don't pay their taxes, like big corporations or people that are not working at the moment? So these individuals depend on the rest of us to keep moving, but yet at the same time, they get to use those resources that we pay for, like health insurance, such as Medicaid, while not contributing to taxes. So is this fair? So it makes us think, well, if they don't pay, then we don't have to pay either. But if too many people do that, everything goes down the drain. And again, this leads to the idea that we are paying our fair share and cooperating as long as everyone else is cooperating as well. And after everyone is cooperating within this scenario, we all ultimately gain some benefit, like Social Security in later adulthood or disability. And so here we turn towards groups and favoritism. So groups are collections of people who share something in common. This could be a shared interest like hobbies, ethnicity, religion, gender, sexual orientation, etc. So research has demonstrated that we tend to favor members of our group, even if that group is arbitrary or made up and has only been established for mere seconds. We have a mere prejudice towards that group. And so this leads us to talking about prejudice. And so related to this are definitions of prejudice and discrimination. So prejudice is an evaluation of another person based on their membership of a group. So this evaluation can be either positive or negative. And discrimination, on the other hand, is an act or behavior towards another individual based on their group membership. And again, this can be either positive or negative. So remember, prejudice is an evaluation and discrimination is the actual carrying out of a behavior. So we'll get into more examples of why prejudice and discrimination can be advantageous, and it can also be harmful later in the chapter and in our class activities. So when participating in a group, we may experience a type of de-individuation where we become less and less aware of our own individual values and being more about being a member of that group. And so one example of this is that even though we may value treating others the way we want to be treated and have values of peace and harmony, if our group is coming against another in competition, we may shed our values and only think of the good of the group. So this again may be positive or negative, or be in a negative type of light. So similarly, diffusion of responsibility occurs when you're in a group and do not feel as much responsibility because others can take the responsibility and not you. So one example of this is if you were driving down the highway and see a small grass fire along the way. You may not feel as much responsibility because you think surely someone else in this crowd of cars has already called the fire in to the highway police, so it's not the responsibility is not falling on me, but to the other people around me. So that, again, there's this diffusion of responsibility in bigger groups. So primarily when we discuss de-individuation and diffusion of responsibility, decision making is not good, and it's not thought out, and behavior is not good either. So groups are sometimes capable of horrible things, as we have seen in our history. The two men pictured here were rescued by police just as residents of their town prepared to lynch them for stealing a car. And because larger groups provide more opportunity for de-individuation and diffusion of responsibility, we can see based on the figure that atrocities become more horrible as the ratio of mob members to victims becomes larger. And so again, we have this loss of rational decision making and a more harsh type of behavior coming out of a group think type of situation. So group decision, although we have been talking about the negative, it isn't always so bad. But what we really need to take into consideration when group decision making isn't that well thought out are things like the status of the group, the volume, so how many people are within the group, and the personality of the group as in general. So these may begin to outweigh rational thinking or any expertise within the group. So you may ask yourself, why might this happen? And most people, the majority of people, do not like rocking the boat and disagreeing with the group. So on a lighter note, in examining the positive side of group membership, although there are some negatives to group membership, inclusion in a group may promote well-being and sense of belonging for an individual. So relatively recent research has examined altruism, or whether humans ever do anything nice without any strings attached. So if you try and think of those who are self-giving and altruistic, we oftentimes think of policemen, firemen, and individuals that are serving in the armed forces. And so this is a question that's begged to be answered, and whether individuals can benefit from another individual without any benefit to themselves. So relatedly, we see altruistic types of behaviors in families, yet we can also observe these behaviors in unrelated individuals, to the point where we overlook our own needs and focus on the well-being of other people. So we see this in our evolution and in animals. So we often are willing to help out a friend who's close to you and that you've known for a long time, even though they're not related to you through blood. You have this connection with them, and you are willing to overlook your own needs and focus on their well-being. So now we turn towards attraction and the feeling of preference towards another individual that is determined by a multitude of different factors. And so one particular determinant of attraction is the mere exposure effect, whereby merely being exposed to an individual increases your liking of that individual. So furthermore, we see that not only the frequency or how many times you are with that individual can influence attraction, but it may also be the arousal of the fight or flight system that can be misinterpreted as attraction. So physical attraction is the major dominant factor in influencing your attraction to another individual. So we see this across both men and women, though men are more apt to admit it. Physical attractiveness may include providing preferential treatment to someone who may be around the same age as you are, that holds similar beliefs and values as you do, have the right body shape, whatever that is, and has facial symmetry. So evolutionarily speaking, these traits of physical attractiveness were seen as good predictors of genes and for reproductive purposes. And so in terms of reproduction, an interesting study had attractive men and women go up to strangers and ask either, would you go on a date with me, or will you go to bed with me? And so they found that there were no differences between men and women in who would agree to go out on a date. Yet they found that there were differences for the "will you go to bed with me" question. So none of the women agreed, and 75% of the men who participated in the study agreed to that second question. So as funny as the study's results are, we considered why women may not agree to the second question in terms of evolution and reproduction. So we know that for women, it is a greater investment to enter in a sexual relationship as opposed to males. So males produce a higher number of sperm, and creating a child for them does not change their ability to create more. For women, they only have a few number of eggs in their lifetime. Conception eliminates the ability to reproduce for 9 months, on top of which pregnancy is very painful and may have lasting effects on the body, as well as put her life at risk. So additionally, our culture has required women to be more selective because sex has a reputation in our society. If a guy has multiple partners, society views him as a man's man, but if a woman has multiple partners, she's considered a slut. So culture and society also play a significant role in women's selectivity. So if sex becomes more of an investment for men, for example, when they are more purposefully looking for a long-term relationship, then we see a shift to where they become more selective in choosing a mate. So overall, the higher the risk, the more selective people will tend to be. In terms of relationships, throughout history, marriage has traditionally served a variety of economic and decidedly unromantic functions, and these range from cementing agreements between clans to pay back debts, and in many cultures that's precisely how it's still regarded. It wasn't until the 17th century that Westerners began seriously considering the possibility that love might actually be a reason to get married. So although we have seen this shift in the last several centuries, we also see a shift in the number of divorces, and specifically within our Western society. So there are many reasons for divorce, and one dominant fault that we may consider is that couples may not have a clear understanding of what love is. But then what exactly is love, and what does social psychology tell us about love? And so as we'll see within the next slide, talking about the two basic kinds of love. There are two, and these include passionate and companionate love. Passionate love is an experience involving feelings of euphoria, intimacy, and intense sexual attraction, whereas companionate love is an experience involving affection, trust, and concern for the partner's well-being. So as we'll see in the next slide, as one goes up, the other goes down throughout the years. Research examining relationships have recently focused on a type of social exchange that occurs within relationships. So equity is a state of affairs in which the cost-benefits ratio of two partners are roughly equal, and we see this oftentimes in relationships where each individual is putting in effort into the relationship. So we see both partners putting in this effort and receiving some benefit from the relationship. In this figure, we see that both kinds of love involve having passionate and companionate love. So as passionate love begins to cool within just a few months, over time, companionate love steadily grows over the years. So you can think of passionate love almost in the sense of a honeymoon period that couples go through when they are first getting together or after they're first married. And so as time goes on and they spend more time with that individual, the passionate love dies down and grows into more of a companionate love where it is built on trust and affection toward your partner, as opposed to that intense attraction that you saw within the first few months of being in a relationship. And so with that wraps up the first section of Chapter 13 in Social Psych.